Hey there, listeners. Welcome to the latest episode of the podcast of Record. It is Tuesday, March the 3rd, and I am going to talk about the weather today because it's important to note that it is 77 degrees outside in Tallahassee, Florida, but Rebecca is sitting in the podcast studio with a Snuggie wrapped around her and looks like a crazy person.
It might be 77 degrees outside, but it's 30 degrees inside
It
our
is
office.
not 30 degrees. It's not anywhere close to 30 degrees. It is above 70 degrees inside this office.
Lies.
And the temperature's rising every minute we're in here because we have to turn
Every
off the air
minute,
to
yeah,
do
because we have to turn off the air. Otherwise,
the
you'd be hearing an
podcast.
annoying background noise. So that being said, welcome to the latest episode. We're glad you joined us again. Welcome to the new listeners. I've been keeping an eye on stats for the last few weeks. We definitely have some new people downloading the podcast. So if you're new, if
Thank
you're
you.
recent, yeah, welcome. Welcome to the party. You now get to sit at the cool kids table. So well, I don't know. This is cool kids table.
Yeah, I wouldn't classify you
This is more
guys
like
as
the
cool.
nerdy kids table.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't really know what it's like to sit at the cool kids
Yeah.
table, so this was just
Never
the
been there.
closest thing I could claim. But nonetheless, you're here, so let's get right into the news.
We need like a news intro music, like
yeah, like something
and now
from
the news.
NPR. Yeah,
Yeah.
I agree. That would be solid.
But we
Producer
don't have
Kyle.
that, so you're just gonna read it.
I mean, it took 7 months for us to get cough buttons put back in our
Yeah.
studio, so we're never going to get a news sound.
I wish I had a camera.
Producer Kyle is making obscene gestures in the podcast
Producer
studio
Kyle's
currently.
been canceled.
Cancel culture has attacked producer Kyle and stolen all his hair. So,
Kyle's hair's canceled.
first up in the news today, Uber is now going to offer its own taxi cab style ad service on drivers' cars.
Everything old is new again, my friend.
Everything
Everything old is new again.
So if you are one of those people that is just enamored with forms of outdoor advertising, you're in luck because now you're going to have a really simultaneously advanced and very basic form of advertising that you can buy for clients.
Can it be bought in real time? Like, is the thing on the top of the Uber car going to be like electronic, where whenever the car goes into a certain area, I could change the ad dynamically?
I
Does
don't
that
know
be
the
kinda
answer
cool?
to that. So I guess the concept, which I do think is kind of cool, is it lets drivers into a piece of the income. So if they put it on their
Oh,
roof,
smart.
they get a share of the income that comes in through the
Yeah.
ads.
I like that.
But like, it would be really cool if there's a platform and you could buy, and like, if it's in this geographic area, it's, you know, at the ad for the local steakhouse. And if it goes outside of that, it's an ad for, you know, dog
Well,
food
if
or
they
whatever.
weren't going to do it before, they're going to do it now. You just gave them a free idea.
I mean, I give away free ideas on this podcast.
but that was a good one. Most of yours aren't good.
I think I've made literally dozens of billionaires just from people watching this podcast and executing on the ideas.
Fact checkers, we're going to have to look into that one.
Says false.
Yeah. So
Pants on fire.
there's a feud going on now between Reddit and TikTok. TikTok, of course, dominating social media culture for the past, I don't know, we'll call it 12 months. If you are under the age of, let's say, 24, TikTok is a huge platform for you right now. None of you are on TikTok because you're all losers. I'm hip with all the kids, so I'm on TikTok.
Have you posted yet?
I have not because
Oh,
I'm waiting for the baby.
awkward.
No. I know what I'm going to post. I'm going to wait for the baby to be born.
Okay.
Yeah, I
You're
have.
Well,
A,
don't spoil
I
it.
have a
Birth?
great first, but no, that would. I don't think I would have a wife after that. I think she.
You'd get a
would.
lot of views.
Yeah, I think.
Gross.
I think that would be a
What
pretty.
music would you play? Like, what would be the music?
Push it.
Real good.
Yeah.
And you get 1 billion views and then you're famous?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Pretty
I
much.
like that. Let's
Well,
do it.
give yourself a plug so people can start following.
Oh, I don't even know what my username is. I think it's just Matthew Farrar.
Okay.
I have 2 friends on TikTok, so it's just not going well.
But you need more, so your
Yeah, I
video
do need
gains
some
So
more.
I
traction.
wish I had done this when I said it, but my idea for a TikTok account is I was going to start a TikTok account and I was going to buy like little action figures, and those action figures would reenact pieces of political debates.
You
I
can
mean,
still do
you
that.
can still do that. I don't understand why.
Where am I going to
to?
find the time and the proper action figures?
I don't know.
What action figure should be Elizabeth Warren?
Don't send out the download this week and instead do that. There you go. Anyway, so Reddit CEO and co-founder Steve Huffman called TikTok, quote, fundamentally parasitic.
Oh, like the movie.
Something like that, due to concerns over privacy during an appearance at the Social 2030 Venture Capital Conference, because we know that venture capital is definitely not parasitic in any way. So this is from The Verge, by the way. This is an article out of The Verge, which is apparently from an article out of TechCrunch. So we're just going 3 chains
All right.
deep
That's
into
meta.
where we're getting our information from. But Huffman specifically called out TikTok's practice of fingerprinting to track devices as being of particular concern.
I mean, this is basically just a way for them to take digs at each other, right? Like, is that a genuine
Well, I mean, TikTok
concern?
is owned by the Chinese government de
Right.
facto.
Right. I mean, that's
Well,
probably.
it's owned by a Chinese company. It's unclear to what level this company has. I mean, obviously, it's in China, so it's to some degree controlled by the government. But it's
government, right.
unclear like who actually owns this company. Could be Jack Ma. We don't know. Maybe he just has another sleeve of ideas
Maybe.
that he's popping out. But I do think it's kind of humorous, again, that at a venture capital conference, they were calling something fundamentally parasitic.
It could be Steve Huffman.
I mean, there's some great articles this week. In fact, I tweeted one the other day about like why startup culture is getting poisonous in some ways because it's just being pushed by venture capital to do things that are not good for the company or the employees, but
Yeah.
are good for the venture capitalists to just be able to pull their money out in 5 to 7 years.
Well, also the venture capital funds don't need every business to win. They need like 1 in 7 or 1 in 8 to win.
Well, but they
So
also
you
need it to
could
win
push
in a
the-
very specific time period,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
They don't want a 20-year success.
So you
They
can
want a
push
7-year success.
we probably need to clarify what our criticism is here. The criticism is this. If you're a business and you take venture capital money, venture capital very specifically wants 20, 30, 50, 100x returns. The way you get those type of returns in a 7 or 8 year time window is you plow a bunch of money into a company that has the potential for high growth, and then you push that company to take big risk, huge burn rates, so that the plan is they can get to their next fundraise. And basically, these companies grow, but they grow unprofitably. They're just burning through.
You're trying to get to
cash.
a Series A or a Series B. I think for me, the breakdown.
But the problem is this growth model breaks a lot of companies.
Yes.
That can't become billion-dollar companies, but could have been $200 million companies.
Yeah. I think it also, for me, like, it's great when that fits in really nicely with the business model and the goals, right? Where you're trying to create a 4 to 7 year high return. But it also forces some businesses where that is probably not the trajectory in which they should grow to try and do it that way in order to get the venture capital firms the return that they so desperately desire or be seen as a failure.
Yeah. I mean, but look, that's part on the entrepreneur as well, where they're raising money from, and that we have a culture that thinks venture capital's sexier than, private equity.
Or any other type of, or bootstrapping, or, I agree. So moving on in the news, this one's from the Wall Street Journal. Actually, the next two are from the Wall Street Journal. So nice plug for WSJ. Tech platforms aren't bound by First Amendment on appeals court rules. So this goes back to an episode from 2-3 months ago, where we talked about the case
PragerU
against Prager University, which claimed that YouTube did not have the right to flag some of its videos based on content. So, Joe, I mean, you had some pretty strong thoughts on this. What are your thoughts now that
what
the court has
they were challenging YouTube on is whether YouTube could be treated as like a platform or a publisher.
Mm-hmm.
If platform, then they couldn't have any editorial, movement on any editorial control over the content. If publisher, then they needed to be treated like a publisher. So what the court effectively said is neither, that it's a private company and therefore its First Amendment right. It can control or not control what's going on the platform.
I think it's important too for some context of what Prager University is. If you're not familiar with it, it is a conservative organization, and it has made a lot of noise by putting out 2, 3, 4, 5-minute explainer videos about such things as why isn't communism as hated as Nazism? Why did America fight the Korean War? And are 1 in 5 women raped at college?
I would really like to have, and I never thought I'd say this, but I'd really like to have an attorney come on the podcast and explain some more of that, like PragerU court ruling as it is. Because it seemed like when it was in the lower courts, it was very one way or the other. It was either publisher or platform. But it looks like the court said it doesn't have to be either, because this case doesn't even constitute that. It's just if YouTube can have any control whatsoever over.
No, it's part of a much
content.
larger conversation about how things should be categorized in the top level sense. All right. Last news item, then we're going to get some deep dives in on culture.
Coronavirus and political campaign spending.
Right. So we have one more news item, and it's, I think Joe thought I was segueing into the deep dive, but we still have one more news item. I
was just telling you what's coming.
Joe's really anxious to get into the culture part of the podcast.
I can barely hear myself. I'm so congested right now. If you're wondering why I sound like this.
We shoved
I
cotton
sounded
balls
like
up
this
his
last
nose.
week too.
No one noticed.
Piss off.
I noticed.
Whatever, you're in a Snuggie. The Wall Street Journal has another article about, how Bob Iger unified Disney's new Magic Kingdom. And I'm less interested in the Wall Street Journal headline and just more interested in the part that Bob Iger, the longtime chief executive officer of the Walt Disney Corporation, very suddenly stepped down last week. Now, he didn't leave the company. He's still remaining executive chairman of the Walt Disney Corporation and going to still be supervising all of the creative projects for Disney through at least 2021. And then they brought up the gentleman that was the president of the parks operation and installed him as the new CEO. But they did it with little advance announcement and just made the swap in a single day. It took some people by surprise. Now, Bob Iger had been very clear that they were working on a transition plan, that he wasn't going to stay around forever. But I mean, this is interesting. It's also interesting in the fact that we had a record-breaking stock week and then a record-breaking low stock week right after.
Yeah.
So we had some of the highest gains that the market has ever seen, and then some of the lowest troughs since the financial crisis of 2008 and 2009 that we saw on Friday.
But for Bob Iger, one, like the vision to make the deals he's been making the last 10 years, probably to be simultaneously the most powerful person in toys, in sports, in entertainment, and in media at the same time. That's a good run. But
I think too, at this point, we can classify Disney Plus as widely successful, right?
Yeah.
The rollout of it, like all they had problem-wise
the
were
biggest
minor
pivot
technological
that company
creep.
needed to make to secure itself over the next decade,
They made
they
successfully.
made it, under his leadership. And look, he got out. Like coronavirus, it may or may not be very, deadly. We don't know yet. As of the recording of this, maybe in like 2 years, people are listening to this and it's like post-apocalyptic, and they're like, "Oh, they were really wrong."
I'd like to think that podcasts are still a big thing in post-apocalyptic world.
And if you are listening to us after the apocalypse, thank you and hang in there.
It's going to be, if we're in the apocalypse, like we're probably not going to be recording in this studio anymore, right? Like we're probably recording from like our treehouse.
Some of us are probably dead.
I'm definitely Rebecca because she's got a Snuggie on.
No, it'll be really warm in a post-apocalyptic world. And
We're
I'll be
in
thriving.
Florida. We're in Florida.
I'll be thriving while you guys are too
You will
hot.
have had a
point.
heat stroke.
But coronavirus is a big deal for Disney. 40% of its revenues come from parks. Its parks in China are already shut down, and its parks in California are hurting because they rely a lot on visitors from Asia Pacific. And if it keeps spreading down in the States and the parks in Orlando get hit pretty hard, it's going to be a pretty bad year for Disney.
Something that's interesting about the Disney parks internationally, though, is that no one actually knows how much of the international parks Disney owns. They don't own all of the international parks in their entirety the way they do Disneyland and Disney World.
Well, I think they are partners with the Chinese government in their Chinese park.
Right.
Correct?
But even some of the European ones. So, we don't actually know, obviously they don't break it down for us, what percentage they own there and then what percentage of the revenue is coming from those individual parks. So, Europe is obviously having its own struggles with coronavirus now, especially in Italy. There's been Pope Francis got tested for coronavirus yesterday. He does not have it, but he had a cough and I guess canceled a bunch of public appearances at the end of last week. So they gave him a coronavirus test to make sure he was okay. He does not have coronavirus.
Get some rest, Pope Francis.
If you want to come on the podcast, hit up producer Kyle at info@podcastofrecord.com. We'd love to have you at Pontifex on the show.
Only if you come in the Pope Mobile. I love that thing.
He's going to do it remotely. I don't want to risk getting coronavirus.
But here's a good pivot. You ready for my pivot? Segue?
Do it.
Segu? Segway is always spelled really weird to me.
Yeah, Kyle had that conversation with me the other day.
So I think the spelling of Segway from the company, like the little motorized scooter
makes
company,
sense.
made much more sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if people are cooped up in their house because of quarantine, they may be watching more Disney Plus programming.
That was actually
an
article. That was actually a topic I heard discussed last night on CNBC. People talking about video game manufacturers, entertainment companies, probably about to go on a pretty successful economic run because of exactly
And
that
that's
reason.
what I wanted to talk about next. It's easy to see the losers in coronavirus, like anybody who has to do anything publicly or in groups. So theme parks, concerts, grocery stores, all
Ultra Music
losers.
Festival in
Yeah.
Miami is considering whether or not it's going to go on.
Any outdoor entertainment.
But let's talk about the winners in coronavirus, and let's pretend that coronavirus means everybody in the United States spends 10 days in quarantine over the next 6 months.
That sounds amazing.
Kind
It
of,
does.
yeah.
It really does. As long as the internet doesn't break.
Yeah. But with internet, utilities, things like that. So who do we think are going to be the winners? And to kind of get you started on some thought exercises here, there was a story that pharmaceutical companies are boosting their spending on Facebook in the run up to the coronavirus outbreak in the United States. So
you can get some ED medication to help fix your coronavirus outbreak.
So if you're Facebook or the other platforms, now the common thinking is, man, when there's a threat to revenues, marketing is the first thing that gets cut. But are there enough people that can come in and backfill that if the big, consumer players cut their marketing funding? Is there enough video game advertising and pharmaceutical advertising and political advertising?
I was going to say, the good news is it's an election year, a presidential election year, so there's not going to be any shortage of people looking to cash in on that empty inventory.
Do you guys see anything else that would come in and backfill the gap? Like what else do you expect people are going to be doing during a quarantine?
I mean, Kindle, I would think, should
that was
definitely
Amazon.
promote.
Yeah.
Oh, that's an interesting
Yeah.
one. So, I mean, Amazon in general, right? I mean, Amazon's
Yeah.
going to do even better than they're normally doing because no one wants to go to the store. They'd much rather have stuff show up at their front door.
Yeah. What about like Postmates and the delivery services like that?
Probably also a similar bump.
But do people trust that the person doing the delivery is going to be healthy?
Well,
I mean, I think Asian restaurants, like, frankly, will have a tougher time. Like, we've already seen in big cities, specifically Chinese restaurants have seen a 70%, in some cases, reduction of number of people willing to come and dine at their restaurants since the coronavirus came out.
I mean, people understand just because it's a Chinese restaurant doesn't mean they've been to China recently.
I understand that. Clearly, the public does not understand that. Literally,
Right.
Corona beer has suffered
Suffered.
sales since the beginning of this. So, I mean, there's the public.
So I think I have a different view on this. I think is Postmates grocery delivery or is that food delivery? I don't really use them, so
I don't think we have them in Tallahassee.
okay. But what is that? Is that just food delivery, like from a restaurant, like Uber Eats, or is that grocery
I
delivery?
think they do like pick. You kind of say what you want and they get it and bring it to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I would say an increase in grocery delivery, but probably a decrease in food delivery. Because I don't trust people making my food. I want my food packaged and safe. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It does. Postmates, according to their website, delivers more than
Okay.
just dinner.
Okay, so all of it.
Yeah, you can kind of tell them to go pick up anything.
Yeah, so like Uber Eats, I would say there's probably going to be a decline. But what's one of the grocery delivery ones you use, Matt?
I use Instacart
Instacart.
for
yeah.
my Publix deliveries.
So I have this list from Morning Consult, and it's a poll of the things people are more or less likely to do, during a coronavirus spread into your community. So the question exactly is, if coronavirus were to spread to your community, would you be more or less likely to do the following? Anybody want to take a guess? Producer Kyle, maybe? What are people least likely to do when coronavirus spreads to their community?
Probably like social events. So like go hang, go to birthday parties.
Go
hang
to a
with people.
concert at
Okay.
63%. And also use public transit.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think anyone is out there under the illusion that public transport
Yeah.
is particularly
And
clean.
so, back to the Disney thing, 62% less likely to go to an amusement park
And a movie theater.
and a movie theater. 51% less likely to take a vacation. Then you get to the bottom.
I mean, this is the time for introverts to thrive.
Yeah.
This is your year.
Only 33% are less likely to vote in an election. People still going to get their vote on.
Well, I mean, you can absentee.
I was going to say, just
Yeah.
submit an absentee. There's no excuse there.
37% less likely to invest in the stock market.
That being said, make sure you're registered to get an
I
absentee
mean,
ballot.
let's talk about the
if you're not
logic.
currently.
Yes. Thank you, Rebecca, for that public
You're
service
welcome.
announcement. Let's talk
Very
about
important.
the logic of people not being willing to invest in the stock market.
Well, I mean, uncertainty. They just don't know.
So, except for the fact that after every supposed virus outbreak we've had for the past 20 years, Ebola, MERS, SARS, avian flu, what was the other one? Cow flu, dog flu? I don't know. There was another,
Mad cow.
pig flu, swine flu. We've seen after we have the scare, there's a stock market drop, and then a year later, a significant bump in the preceding months. So,
Yeah.
I mean, if anything,
Well, because
right
it
now you
causes-
should be, I mean, we had the largest single increase in a day of the stock market yesterday in the history of the stock market.
Well, it causes people to delay making purchases, not
Sure.
necessarily not do them.
But buy while things are cheap. I'm not an investment advisor. I'll give you the same disclaimers that CNBC gives you before Jim Cramer comes on the air and
You've been
starts
watching too
screaming
much
at you.
CNBC.
Well, I found out I can listen to it on XM radio on the way home too, which is great
so you
because
get
then
extra
Jim Cramer
CNBC?
can scream at me while
In the
I'm
car?
driving to the house. Yep.
Speaking of screaming, American politics. So final segment.
Speaking of infections,
Speaking of
American
infections.
politics.
So today is Super Tuesday, and so we don't know the outcome. This podcast will come out after Super Tuesday.
If you want to make a prediction, you'll look like a genius or an idiot.
That's true. But we do want to break down what's going on in political campaign spending. So I'll start us off here. We have the total spend numbers from the State of the Screens newsletter. Total spend. Anybody want to guess who the biggest spender is so far?
Michael Bloomberg.
Mini Mike.
$538 million. He accounts for 52% of all spending so far, followed by Tom Steyer at $186 million and Bernie Sanders at $49 million.
R.I.P. Tom Steyer campaign.
Yeah, I mean, R.I.P. Pete Buttigieg at $35 million, Elizabeth Warren hanging in there at $24, R.I.P. Amy Klobuchar at $16.
I mean, Pete Buttigieg is already lined up, though. Biden said he reminds him of his son, so he's going to give him a post in his administration.
Man, Uncle Joe's just handing out nice gifts.
Uncle Joe brings you into the inner circle in a real nice way.
Yeah, not holding a grudge. What a
Got-
good guy.
Mayor Pete got that private jet flight to Dallas last night with Amy Klobuchar.
So one of the interesting things I've seen, an article that came out a couple of weeks ago pointed to that the Trump campaign have shifted their spending from being about 80% Facebook to now only about 60% Facebook, and are diversifying their buys. So they're buying podcasts, they're buying other DSP type platforms.
buying this podcast.
Bloomberg and Trump could buy this podcast. It's for sale.
We'd run them back to back just like the Super Bowl.
Yeah, equal time. What do you guys think for ad spending? Like, what other trends do you see?
I mean, we've talked about this in a couple of episodes before, but I think,
Like the diversity of buying.
so I think the Bloomberg campaign and just the quantity, the sheer quantity of content that they are pumping out is truly outstanding.
So I have a number for you.
I'm not even commenting on quality, just like the sheer number of pieces of content they put out on a daily basis for a campaign is stupefying.
So Tech for Campaigns, which is a progressive-leaning group, did analysis, and it says Trump has run 58,000 more ad variations on Facebook than all major Democrats combined. So he's run 994 ad variants compared to only 228,000 for all Democrats. Now, that excludes Bloomberg, who has run about 190,000 variants in just the 4 months he's been in the race.
So here's another reason why I will critique that like data point a little bit. Like they are just counting dynamic creative in those Facebook ad campaigns, right? So they're counting like a different variation of creative and headline and post text and button text as a completely different ad, which is correct, right? Like there is variation, and we know from testing that there's a difference in click-through and conversion percentages on those ads. But the thing about Bloomberg is I'm sure they are running a similar set of dynamic creative ads, but they're putting out way more content than the Trump campaign is or anyone else. I mean, Bloomberg in the 4 months he's been in the race has already generated tons of different videos, both advertising and organic. They have stuff going up for every single state. So, I mean, for a campaign that is virtually 4 or 5 months old, they have put out an enormous number of actual different pieces of creative, not just variations of ad testing.
And this is what is interesting. And so this report in Type for Campaign says creative choices can influence ad performance up to 3.4 times more than targeting. So the history of political campaigning over the last decade has been about targeting and micro-targeting and better targeting, and that's what all the 2016 fallout was about, and Cambridge Analytica, and targeting based on psychographic profiles. But where the platforms have headed over the last 3 years is towards disproportionately rewarding creative variant and not rewarding the targeting as much.
Mm-hmm.
So in some weird ways, all of the push about privacy and targeting is about to be a non-issue with the way modern campaigns or advertising is done, because you kind of just put out the creative now and see who comes to it.
Build it and they will come.
We'll build a lot of it and they will come.
Build many pieces of it.
And here's another interesting fact. Ad cost increased 18% within 7 days of an ad launch, emphasizing the need to continually refresh content. Now, I have some thinking on what you're seeing here with the platforms, and it's this. The past decade for the big platforms, Google, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, consumer time on device has been increasing by 10, 12, 15 minutes per year. So we went in 2010, we were spending 8-9 hours a day with media, to this year we're going to be over 12 hours a day on media. That's about as high as we can go and still sleep and do normal life stuff. So the competition,
I think people have been very clear that they're willing to sacrifice sleep and quote
True.
other stuff for more screen time.
True, but above 12 hours, it gets tough. Right. And so
We'll see.
The platforms didn't have to compete with each other for attention because people just stack on more time.
Yep.
You would download the Twitter app and then spend
You
20
wouldn't
minutes a day on
substitute your
Twitter.
Facebook time. You just added 20 minutes of new
Right.
Correct.
Twitter time. Yeah.
And what's happening is now these platforms are starting to actually compete with each other for
Mhm.
content. And what keeps people coming to a platform is that content fresh and new and timely and relevant. And so all of the platforms are rewarding fresh, new, timely, relevant content more than they ever have before because it's the driving force of what they do. They're now competing for that attention and that piece of the pie.
And I think that's interesting. I mean, compared to what a lot of the logic, especially on the like corporate and commercial side for the last few years, has been, put a piece of creative out there and let it run for a fairly long time to actually test over, beyond just a few hours or a few days, actually do a long-term test of how it performs and then make your decision, right? Like that was the logic for a number of years is if you have content that is working well, keep it up. Let people keep liking, commenting, clicking on it, engaging with it, sharing it. And I don't know that I'd go so far as to say we're seeing punishment for that now, but we're definitely seeing rewards on the opposite side of that line of thinking.
I mean, and look, this is an ad cost increase at 18% within 7 days of ad launch. But look, what you're saying, but a good ad may not have that 18% increase.
Right.
A good ad may have no increase or a 2% increase, right? This 18% is all ads. So that's your studs and your duds all combined.
Correct.
So another piece of research that caught my attention that I thought was pretty well done and interesting was out of the markup.org, and they reviewed candidates' email sends, and they categorized them in the Gmail inbox on desktop, which puts things in a primary box, a promotions box, or a spam box. And then they coded what candidates were most successful at getting the percentage of their emails into primary versus promotion versus spam. Anybody have any guess what candidate was most successful at getting their emails into the primary inbox? So not into the promotions or spam folder. And I was actually surprised by the number. So give me the candidate and the number of emails that landed in the primary.
I would
number
say
of
that
emails
it's
will be tough.
probably
Percentage.
Okay.
my picks would be either Mayor Pete or maybe Amy Klobuchar.
I'm going to go Michael Bloomberg and Joe Biden.
And percentage of their emails that landed in the primary inbox that didn't get captured in
I'm
promotions
going to
or
go
spam.
low, like 30%.
Yeah, I'd say a quarter, 30%, something like
So
that.
the answer is Pete Buttigieg,
Ha!
who had 63% of his emails make it into the primary
Damn.
inbox. Yeah.
Mayor Pete. All right.
So if you're listening to this and you don't know, it is really challenging.
it is really challenging.
Very challenging to get an email into that primary tab in Google.
Oh, if I'd have scrolled like 2 inches farther on this article, I would have had the answers right in front
Yeah.
of me, but I did not.
Only 9% went to promotions, but 30% of his emails went straight to spam. Number 2 was Yang, and 47% of his went to primary and 49 went to spam. What I think is interesting here is, so Bloomberg, only 17% went to primary, 83% promotions, but none to spam. So what's interesting is the candidates that were best at hacking that primary tab were also the most likely to get penalized on some sins and put in the spam box.
So,
But the ones that hit promotion most often had the least chance of getting put in the spam box.
I mean, we
Interesting.
don't have obviously any insight into how Google's algorithms are determining whether or not these people go into primary or promotions. I mean, obviously we know a little bit of spam, but we don't know, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
I have a feeling it has a big thing to do is does Google see one email send going out to multiple Gmail users?
Yeah, so here's my line of thinking. When you look at the most successful people, is the people at the top of the list are the least known national figures, right? Bernie Sanders has been sending out political emails for forever.
But he's
So
got
has
96% in promotions, but almost none in 2%.
Which makes perfect
in
sense
spam.
because they know. I mean, look, the being classified as spam or not is a matter of language, right? Like the formula is pretty straightforward for making sure you avoid the spam folder. But that difference between primary and promotions, over time, the Gmail servers are definitely going to know that that emails from Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren and Donald Trump and probably Joe Biden and
yeah.
Beto are political fundraising-ask emails and belong in the promotions tab. All these people at the top are people that have the least known national profile. We got Julian Castro coming in at 12%. Bill Weld, the underdog for the Republican nomination for president of the United States in 2020, coming in at 3%.
So, question: what do you think Klobuchar did wrong? Because 91% of hers went into promotions, and like she wasn't necessarily a household name.
But she's been a senator for a long
Okay.
time in Minnesota, right? All these people, even if they're not big nationally, like Castro, Andrew Yang, Pete Buttigieg, these are not people that have sent blast emails to large
Yeah,
audiences
for a long
until the
time.
past 12 months.
Okay.
Amy Klobuchar has been sending fundraising emails for her Senate race for a long time.
Yeah, and Bloomberg's basically the only one who sent emails that managed to stay out of the spam box entirely. Another interesting note in the report I was just reading from is what the candidates are doing. All of the Democratic candidates, except for Bloomberg, are spending all of their email and ad traffic on raising money, and only Trump is doing things on list building. And there was a piece in the New Yorker over the weekend about Brad Parscale basically bragging about the size of the Trump list operation. They're expected to have 70 million people in their list. And to give you some perspective, I think Obama at his biggest, his list was only in the high 20s of million people. So that Trump list going to 70 million. And it's through tactics like this, selling the T-shirt, signing the card.
Right.
And then they push people to do secondary things. So not only they get them into the email list, they try and get them to sign up for text messages.
Yeah, there's a push to get people into communication platforms that aren't as well regulated, right? In your text message inbox, they can be a lot freer with what they say. There's no approval process with what they have to go through in terms of content. So they want to be in your inbox. That's still where the donations happen. They want to be in your text messages inbox. Like that's where communication happens. It makes sense that they would spend that amount of time to get into communication platforms that don't have the regulations.
And not have the intermediary.
Yeah, and
between
not
them
have
and the
to
voter.
not have to slap disclaimers,
by.
wait for approvals from the Facebook regulators, like all the stuff that can be a pain in the ass, especially if you're measuring it for a national presidential campaign.
Any other thoughts on what we're seeing ads-wise in the campaigns right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think Trump just does a really impressive job of variety in terms of what's in his ads. He does a ton of polls. He does a enter for a chance to win dinner with the president when he's in X location. Just like the item giveaways or even like promoting promotional items, all the cards. He just has like the most diverse content of that I've personally seen in
That's
my
a good way of
feed.
describing it. Is he's got the most like the most diverse array of content. Everybody else is raise money, raise money, raise money, raise
Correct.
money.
Yeah.
And then the occasional
Michael Bloomberg.
giveaway.
Well, Bloomberg is
Right.
push message, push message, push message.
Yeah.
Only Trump is message push, sell a T-shirt, small dollar donation, sign the card, data collection focused.
And the same thing with the emails. Like, I don't know if you've noticed, but they come from everyone in the Trump family. I've gotten things from Lara Trump, Eric Trump, and he does one of the most impressive jobs of the guilt of like, the deadline's tonight at midnight, and then you get like a 9 p.m. email.
The president
that's like,
doesn't see your name on this list yet.
And so
he's sitting in the Lincoln bedroom just going through that list, is he?
And but you click on it, and it has like, the things highlighted and this like official list embedded in the email, and your name is typed in there, but it's not on there because you haven't contributed. It's always very impressive. Like even opening it, being like, oh, I know what to expect. I'm like, wow, this makes me feel guilty, and like I even know the game being played here. So yeah,
none of the Democrats seem to be even close to that level.
No.
Maybe Bernie's the closest.
Bernie, Elizabeth Warren did a lot of diverse type content, like Get a Beer with Warren. She tried to do a lot of those kinds of contests.
They've all done pretty much every major campaign at this point has done the like win a dinner or a coffee or a beer or whatever. And that was actually a tactic that we really didn't see before the 2016 election that I can remember was we'll fly you out to have pizza with Mayor Pete and Chasten Buttigieg. And like, then you get to go to the rally with them, and then we'll fly you home. Like, that is a fairly
and
new
then we'll
tactic.
quit the campaign.
That is what happens.
That's something you see a lot with celebrities. Like, your celebrity goes on tour, and then, someone you listen to, and then you get that opportunity. So I almost wonder if it's a page that like Trump ripped out of Hollywood and brought to the campaign.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's very like radio station-esque prize. That's an interesting point. One interesting thing about Bloomberg, too, is when I look at these stats and I see particularly what percentage of their emails we're talking about fundraising, email is still the biggest place to ask for online contributions, outperforms basically any other form. The interesting thing about Bloomberg is basically the only Democratic candidate in the race that has had the luxury of not having to have a minimum number of donors in order to qualify for something. So the Democratic debates that were back in the late summer, early fall, they had to have a minimum number of donors.
They're spending like $150 to get a $1 donation.
Yeah, so you saw Tom Steyer spending an ungodly amount of money to get a $1 donation just so he could get qualified for the debate. Now that they don't have to do that, all Bloomberg has to be doing is polling at a specific level to get invited to the debate. He has the luxury, unlike those campaigns in the fall, of not having to spend money in order to get useless $1 donations.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I think the takeaway, though, is the creative, the speed and volume is the game changer right now. It's what targeting was the last, 3 cycles, 4 cycles. That's what speed and volume means right now. Can you produce a lot of content on several different platforms and do it very quickly? If you can't do that, you're probably going to get washed over, even if you have money. And that's the difference. And that's going to be the tough part for the corporate and agency level, too, when this eventually spills over, is you can spend a bunch of money on ads, but your returns are going to be diminished if you can't do speed and volume.
Well, it's kind of annoying as an ad buyer because doesn't it take about 14 days for an ad to optimize anyways? And according to the chart we were looking at, that's 2/3 of the life of when it's getting most expensive.
Yeah, but keep in mind that was aggregating all the ads together. So probably when you're testing, what happens when you come out of that testing is your ads that are the high performers stay low for a very long time, and your ads that are the low performers
you swap
drop
out
off.
the rest.
I think one thing, just to close on this, presidential candidates' emails in the Gmail primary inbox is, it makes, if I'm Joe Biden, the Pete Buttigieg endorsement and partnership a lot more valuable, right? Obviously there's the fact that he won Iowa and has some delegates or whatever, but if you've got the only guy still left in the race as of 2 days ago that has a 63% primary inbox ratio, that is a really valuable list for you to be able to annex and bring into your world.
But can they, though? Like, does it still have to be operated by Pete's people?
It has to be operated by...
We also don't know what they're using to send. I guarantee there's something that Pete and Andrew Yang were doing on their tech side to make that happen.
Probably, but...
They weren't using MailChimp.
You don't necessarily need the Buttigieg campaign to hand over their list, right? Like, they still are empowered to send out emails. So they can send out an email from Mayor Pete to talk about the great things that Vice President Biden has done. They don't really need to bring that into their actual atmosphere.
Oh, and that would be the smart thing to do. Like, he
Sure.
keeps his name ID and he still keeps his fan base, but it's the only way you get the audience to be receptive of it. Like, oh,
Yeah, and that's
these are
the game.
Yeah, like, this is where we align. If you supported me, you should support this guy.
Cool. Well, Kyle's telling us we got to close, so remember, it's Super Tuesday. Don't vote. It doesn't matter. But do listen to this podcast.
Well, by the time you listen, the election's going to have
Hope
long
you didn't
since been
vote because
over.
it didn't matter.
Twitter suspended 70 pro-Bloomberg accounts for platform manipulation. It's just the Wild West out there right now.